We're good. Okay. Good evening. Welcome to the Thursday, February 8th open session of the Community Preservation Committee at Town Hall. And I will read the preamble. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting will be conducted via in-person and via remote means. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with the right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website at www.northandoverma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so on their televisions or by tuning to Comcast Channel 8, Verizon Channel 26, or online at www.northandovercam.org. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the town website an audio or video recording, transcript, and other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. If the public would like to participate in the public meeting, please email your questions and comments prior to or during the meeting to cpcemails@northandoverma.gov. The question or comment will be provided to the committee before the meeting or read during the proceedings, if received during or shortly before the meeting. Okay. All right, thank you. We are going to jump right in and hear from applicants. What I would suggest is that maybe we give a general guideline of like 3 minutes for each person to come up and give a description for the general public. And we'll take questions just back and forth. If we have any additional comments, we'll go from there. Does that sound good? Okay. Let's do this. I want to be fair, or at least, why don't we start with historic preservation, and we'll have the 1836 Meeting House Committee go first. So.
Do you want to read that?
I'm good. Yeah. Oh, you have it all for there?
I don't have everything.
I have it up too. So. Okay. Yes, you can. Hello. You can sit there or at the. That's perfect. And yep, the microphones are active. So. I think so. Right. If the green light's on, they're active.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so introduce yourselves, and yeah, we'll shoot for. I'll give you the high sign at 3 minutes, and then kind of wrap it up from there.
Okay. Yeah, my name's Stephanie Harrington, and I'm here with our to present our proposal for the Friends of the 1836 Meeting House preservation project for the Meeting House.
And I'm Gary Martin, and I'm helping in the work that we're planning to do in project management.
Great.
Yeah, so we'll sort of follow the application. So we have I think everybody knows the building, the 1836 Meeting House, which is on the North Andover Common, where North Parish Unitarian Congregation is. And it's, I'll have Gary talk about, the construction issues. But we're here to propose this project for funding. It's a National Historic Site. We've got a lot of preservation work that needs to be done on the bell tower and the facades and the spires. It's so it's sort of it's a big task, and so but we want to preserve this historic structure that is so well known on our common. So I'll have Gary, talk about, what's required, and, and then we've got 3 minutes right now.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, we talked about this a little when we met before, but basically We began the project thinking that it was going to be an energy-saving project. We wanted to insulate the building, but realized that somewhat more important than that is to repair the leaks that are there and damaging the building, and we don't want to insulate a building that's got leaks. And in reviewing the work to be done with a contractor, we realized that on a couple of sides of the building, the siding was in pretty poor shape. And he proposed that on those two sides, we completely remove the siding, do the insulation, and then put new siding back on. The other two sides were not nearly as bad. We're going to remove part of the siding in order to do the insulation, repair that, do quite a few repairs to parts of like the window casings and things, and paint the entire building. The spires are probably in the worst condition, and we've included a couple of pictures of holes in some of them. And in those, we want to completely replace them in the process of doing this. So that's the biggest part of the work, and it's quite expensive to do the whole building.
Great. That was just about 3 minutes. Do you have anything else you want to, I don't want to pigeonhole you too much, but I figured, like, in the interest of everyone's time, we could do that, because I know there will be a lot of questions.
Well, I could, we'll just wait for it sounds like you have a lot of questions, so
Okay.
hopefully that should cover everything.
All right. Sure, why don't we start, John? Start?
Yeah, I guess, Bill, just to put this in context, is this going to be the only review, or are we going to bring individual projects back for a deeper dive?
I think, we've had the preliminary call, the preliminary meeting. I think we could certainly, we have seen things amended. We have seen applications amended and reconsidered. That's certainly not outside of it. I think, we want to do as much as we can here tonight, though, and then kind of review the proposal from here.
I mean, probably for me, it's more question than, a comment than a question is, I'm a big supporter of the concept of supporting this. Church, I was on the board when the prior project was, and we funded that. But the environment we live in is a much different environment. I don't think we should set the expectation we're necessarily going to be able to bring this forward this year, given all the hurdles that are involved legally. So that's my only point. I commend you for what you're doing. I think it's a great thing. I think it's, if there's anything that's the essence of preservation, it's this. But the fact that it's a church is going to make a harder lift. That's probably my observation, so.
Would you like us to address that? Because we've thought about that
Sure.
quite a bit.
And I think everyone should note, in the public, as part of the application package, given our earlier concerns, like, we've had a pretty consistent answer that it's very difficult in the current climate, and you did prepare a full sort of explanation. So if you look at the meeting materials, any of you who are watching at home, the group has done that. I think maybe we start with that and a little bit about the whole idea of the Friends of the Meeting House versus the North Parish as a sort of a religious institution, I think would also be helpful. And we want to start there, and then we can pepper in.
Well,
I think that's probably the biggest concern.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you for letting us discuss that, because I know it is one of your biggest concerns. So we, in 2015, started the process to get the Friends of the Meeting House designation. It's a 501c3, so that's been in place, and that's really sort of separated the meeting house and and any maintenance and capital expenses. So it has its own entity. That entity is completely separate from the Unitarian Universalist congregation. Financiers are separate financial reports. It's two separate entities, and that and so and it would be kept that way. So, you know, we apply as, you know, the 501c3, Friends of the 1836 Meeting House, and I did, you know, attach that information. So, you know, when I did my research on the 3 tests, and I'm not a lawyer, so, but, you know, I read some of the cases, I read some additional information that I found through some of the Massachusetts legal publications, to really understand, you know, what the 3 tests were and why they had them. So it was interesting. I got a lot of good information about the, you know, so churches, funding of churches is not banned outright. I mean, that's where I think that was a big part of that decision. So you know, and then so further guidance is, you know, the Supreme Court, you know, in determining that, and looking at different cases like the Acton congregation, you know, set forth guidance using the 3 tests, which come from the anti-aid amendment, which, you know, is, which sort of, you know, looks at, you know, church, well, religious organizations and funding. So I did address the 3 tests without getting, you know, into the, you know, this is kind of a complicated issue, so without getting into the legal aspects of the ruling very much. We, you know, so there's the 3 tests, and let me just pull out that piece here just so I can stay on track. So it's, you know, whether the purpose of the grant is to aid a church, that's the first one. Whether the grant will have the effect of aiding the church and its essential functions. And 3, whether the grant avoids the risk that prompted the passage of the Anti-Amendment Act of, you know, for political and economic abuses. So starting with number 1, I, you know, we sort of, you know, addressed that we have, you know, the 501c3 designation for the meeting house. So, you know, we've separated the church from, you know, the meeting house functions and preservation. So, you know, we applied as the 501c3. Then I discussed, you know, the Unitarian Church's budget. We, you know, every year we fund our own budget. We raise our own money. You know, the budget, you know, covers everything we need to, that we're going to need. That's presented by our council, and it's voted on at our annual meeting. And then we have our annual appeal, and we raise those funds. And so that's, you know, and that happens every year. It's, you know, it goes up obviously. But I included our budget so that you can see, you know, both the revenues and the expenses, just sort of as verification that, you know, that's, you know, that there would be no intermingling for this project. It's, you know, really completely separate from, you know, the church, you know, the salaries, the ongoing maintenance, and operations, and staffing, and so forth. So the so under, you know, the second test, whether the grant would have the effect of aiding the church in its essential functions, you know, they talk about, well, you know, if we're paying for this, like maybe you're going to use the funds to do something else, right? You know, sort of very simply. And so what I've, you know, what I can say is that, you know, when we do have, you know, in the past, when we've had extraordinary expenses, you know, we have raised the funds, but they've never been, you know, to this extent. And we did get CPA funding one year, and I think it was 20 years ago, that helped with some, you know, as you can imagine, there's always a lot of work that needs to be done in a structure like this. So, but this, you know, and with today's costs, I mean, really, it's just like so much more than, you know, that then we could raise, and it needs to be done. It really is at a point where, we've got leaking, we've got damage inside. The funds will be used for just the exterior work. That's, part of the, we're just, very much doing the exterior work that needs to be done. The interior work with the damage, that we will fund on our own. So that's, money that we will have to raise to do those interior repairs that are necessary. And so I think when you talk about the essential functions of the essential religious functions, we've really sort of like looked at that, and in the Acton case, they wanted to funds to preserve their stained glass windows, and a lot of those windows were, they had religious iconography on them, and they determined that was, that was sort of a clear, that was very clear that sort of crossed over that essential religious functions line. There were a couple of other things that they wanted to do a plan of their historic, like a long-term plan for historic buildings on the property, and another, and I can't remember what. Oh, and the roof. So that they didn't. So the courts didn't rule on those things. They sent it back to, I believe, the local courts, but then the church decided not to come back for funding. So a decision was never made on those things. So what the guidance is now that I've read is that all of these the grants are looked at on a case-by-case basis. And so I've tried to really outline what we're doing here, and the separation, and so speaking to the third in the guidance I read, they said, if you meet the first two tests, then you've really met the third test, which is to whether the grant avoids the risks that prompted the passage of the anti-aid amendment in the first place, which goes back to 1857. So we feel like we have met those tests, and we're happy to discuss that. If you feel like the town's legal counsel wants to address that, and would that be the process at this point?
Yes, I think we would definitely involve legal counsel to examine this and take a look. I think that would definitely be part of what we would do in analyzing this. And I think I wanted to read one sentence. Like, I read the whole thing like 3 times because it is very dense. But I think, maybe for the discussion, it could be helpful to read this sentence again. Our proposed preservation budget is strictly limited to the extraordinary expenses that the congregation would otherwise not incur in carrying out essential functions if we were not housed in the building, if we were not housed in the meeting house. So in other words, suffice it to say, like, if you were trying to devote a lot of resources to religious functions, to proselytizing or worship or so forth, you wouldn't do that in a historic structure because that would siphon off a lot of your funds. So maybe you would do like a prefab church that had great energy efficiency and so forth, and then you could maximally do that. And if you came to us and said, like, we want to, we want funding to do that, we would obviously say no. But I think that sentence for me at least kind of got to the core of it, that like, if this group were not housed within this thing, they wouldn't be incurring these expenses. So the parish itself and the community there, exists apart from the building, but the building has historic features that could have public interest in preserving. So, and that's kind of my distillation, but I certainly want to hear from everybody in question.
I've got a couple of questions along this whole line. What are the legal ownerships, the legal titles, the legal relationships between the church and the Friends? Are they separate legal organizations?
Well, as a 501c3, my understanding is that's its own entity. It would have its own financials and budget and.
The Friends does.
The Friends, right.
And therefore, who owns the building itself?
So, yeah, actually, I was, I don't know, Deb, would you be able to speak to that?
I believe that, I don't think that anything was done to create a separate deed.
You need to speak in the microphone, please.
Sorry.
Deb Putnam is a member of our church and on the Building and Grounds Committee and has been working on this building for many, many years.
You know, I was one of the 3 people who was involved in setting up Friends of the Meeting House, specifically so because we recognized the turmoil that was going on around separation of church and state. And, you know, we're very privileged to have access to this building. We've inherited it, really. But I don't believe that there's ever been a legal separation as far as deed. Just
So Friends don't have, the Friends, for example, do not have the title or the
does
deed.
not have a title that says 1836 Friends Meeting House.
Going down this path still, do the Friends have their own separate budget than the one that was presented here?
They do. It's not very big so far because it's a very fairly new organization. And this is the first real challenge that they've taken on.
Is the facility used by the congregation, the church's congregation, for meetings, for instance?
Meetings as in services or meetings as in other forms of business?
Church activities?
There are, of course, we do Sunday services in the building, but we also offer the building up to outside organizations. We
That was
house.
my next question.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. I don't know if any of you were around last weekend, but it was the kickoff of the Black History Month celebrations. We had 200 people in the sanctuary attending a concert of gospel choirs.
Great.
And that was totally separate. That was actually a
It was with the
project
town.
with the town, right?
That we did.
Great.
North Parish offered the space. We have other concerts. Essex Chamber has done a concert with us for the last 2 years,
Yeah,
that kind of stuff.
Sure,
Yeah.
that sounds good. Just my last question, do you have firm quotes for the work you do, and, okay. Those, you'll probably need contingency
Yeah.
in your project to take care of the escalation as we, yeah, I know.
Yeah, you've got that, Gary. It just said
You
all of
need-
that stuff
you
is
need enough,
included.
I know.
Yeah.
Now, Gary has put, he has put
We-
together, he's, found people to do this work, which is, very specialized work. He's gotten the bids, so that's how we've been able to determine what the cost is. And, and it's, we hope that, we can be considered this year because it's, we've got the quotes, they're ready to go. And, it's work that really should not go another winter.
Got it, okay.
I did have one other question. Let's assume we work everything out and we get funded. What have you thought about in terms of a preservation restriction you would grant the town because we've provided this money?
There is a preservation restriction already in place from the first building project we
Right,
did.
but it's not comprehensive, I don't think.
I don't know, John. I couldn't speak to that exactly. I know it's like a term of 35 years, and that's with Mass Historic.
Right, I do remember that.
So you remember that? Okay.
Yeah, I remember that,
Yeah.
because John Smolak worked on that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I don't know if it covers the entire envelope of the church and all of the activities, or just related
Just
to
the
the steeple.
just the meeting house. So the meeting house is
It may be the full meeting house, but I think we need to go back in and look at that.
Okay.
And if we need to extend the time period of it, I think, you don't want to get this hung up for this reason, so.
Right. With the National Historic Preservation designation, and I don't know if there's a term on that for the national.
That's a lifetime thing.
It seems
But
like
the
it.
restriction, the historic restriction is 35 years. That, not prohibiting work, but asking that the work be approved and meet historic standards. Is that your memory of the way it goes?
Basically, I mean, that's the spirit of the thing, whether it makes sense to just extend the term of that.
Okay.
Or does it need to be expanded, I don't know, but I think we need to address that. Because remember, it's, when we do a project that's for a private entity as opposed to a public entity, a historical preservation project, people ask, well, what's the community going to get out of it? And I think it's pretty obvious and intuitive, but you need to say, look, we're going to get a conservation restriction.
Put it in black and white. Yeah.
Ron is joined virtually, so I want to make sure that I gave him a chance to pipe in if he wishes.
So, yeah, in terms of the historic preservation agreement, the Historical Commission will be meeting on Monday to review that. The project's been proposed. We have 30 days to respond. I'm hoping that we can actually get it done in one meeting on Monday. But if nothing else, it'll be done within 30 days of, I think it was submitted earlier this week.
Yeah, I have a question about sort of just the funds that you've raised thus far. You've raised 300,000 so far. Is that all local folks? Is it folks in the congregation? Is that strictly what it is?
Yep.
Have you considered it all? Have you looked at your National Historic Place, right? Other preservation foundations, national, local. I know that they're out there that can provide potentially funding for churches that are in these sorts of situations, that are in historic buildings. Is that something you've explored at all?
One of the ones that Steph has on her to-do list is Essex Heritage, because they also gave money to us in the first preservation project we did in 2005.
Okay.
Their funds are much more restricted.
Right.
They don't have quite the same pool to draw from. But certainly, I mean, if you know of any, I'm sure we'd be happy to.
I mean, there are some out. There's the Getty Foundation, the National Trust for Historic Preservation. I mean, there are some organizations out there that specifically, this is a huge problem for a lot of churches around the country, right?
Yeah.
They're doing great work, but they're almost hamstrung because they're in these beautiful historic buildings that they need to preserve. So, I think that's definitely something that you should perhaps take a look at.
I know that a former member of North Parish who was involved in our last building project is now a resident of Gloucester. And I don't know if any of you know the situation with the Gloucester Meeting House. They, in a similar fashion, had significant structural issues to be dealt with. They actually moved out of that as a church and are now setting it up as a community preservation space, and have been working for years and probably are going to continue working for some years. We're hoping to not leave the building. We're hoping to be able to continue to do what we're doing. And just, again, by setting up the Friends, which isolates the meeting house as its own historic site, hopefully allow us to be able to stay there and keep doing what we're doing.
Right, and, I just think generally, just sort of my 2 cents is I think your presentation is a good one. I think you explained well why you think you've separated kind of church and state essentially here. It's clearly a historic building. It's clearly important to North Andover. You clearly do a lot of good work in the town. There's no question about that. I think it's just a lot of money, quite frankly. It's a lot of money. So that makes it a challenging situation.
It is, and I think, Gary, you talked about at one point, and this probably came up at the Historic Commission meetings too. One of the issues, we've parsed things out over the years to deal with a structural beam that had to be replaced in the north wall because it was bulging and going to pop out one of those big windows in there. We've done various piecework over the years to try to preserve elements of the meeting house. But every time you do those things, that's a big building. What was the quote? $20,000 anytime you do anything that involves going up. And so, we Gary, I know, talked with the builders about, well, can we phase this? But it's one of those things that by the time you put in the scaffolding, you just got to go do as much as you can do while they're there. Because you're just throwing more money at the project if you have to come back again and again and again.
How long has your congregation been in the building
Since its beginning.
since its beginning?
This has been, North Parish is a continuously operating congregation,
Okay.
not as a Unitarian Universalist congregation, but has been continuously occupying a church building. This is the 5th meeting house since 16-something. Sorry. It's on one of our banners, I can't remember.
And are you all associated with sort of a national organization?
The church,
Yes,
the
the church
Unitarian
itself.
Universalist Association.
Is there any opportunities for sort of funding or anything?
We pay them.
You pay them?
Yeah, we pay them.
All right,
Yeah.
okay.
It's in the budget.
Yeah, and we do, we'll definitely look at other grants. I mean, I'm a volunteer, I have a job, and we're all volunteers.
So wait.
Yes, that's
Yes,
right.
exactly.
I know,
You understand.
You know
Yeah.
how, it's like, it's a big project. Grant writing is, it's a lot of work, and, searching grants, it's a lot of work, and, we have, we have minimal staff. We don't really have fundraising staff.
For projects like this.
Right, and volunteers do, we do a lot of fundraisers, but that's volunteers.
So, I don't really, I think it's a great project. It's obviously when I see the church, I see North Andover. It's basically a symbol, but I am not comfortable going forward with it personally because we've already said no to 2 other churches. In some of the work that was being done on the other church, where it had nothing to do with the church, had separate buildings, and so what I would like to see us do is get a solid, from town council, some type of an opinion from town council, and then give everybody the opportunity to come back, if that was the case, because we've said no to others. And I just, personally, I'm just not comfortable with it without legal, and it's not something they're gonna give us in a week. This is something that they're gonna need to look into this for some time. That would be my thought. But that's where I stand. But if you had a fundraiser that was town-wide, I'd be happy to join in.
So do we have any understanding, Bill, of other, CPC organizations, how they funded, religious?
It's really slowed to a trickle because we're still, it's a fairly recent decision, right? It's like
Yeah.
6 years. So I think it's really sort of stymied a lot of the activity,
Well, my question is, we can't be the only local town board
No,
that's asked
no,
this
I mean,
question.
a lot
So
of
has
what-
it been answered
yeah,
elsewhere already? is what I'm
Well,
wondering.
I was thinking of just asking Stuart. 'cause he's
Yeah.
the one person.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
I would suggest taking this package and sending it off to Stuart.
Yeah, I don't think there are very many, but he would know everyone because they keep the database of all the projects
Right.
out. So we could ask him.
Well, clearly we need a legal decision
Right.
before we make any decision. All that being said, I do think that we should judge each of them, individually. So I think that's something we have to consider.
Well, remember, one of the things that's important about CPC is the optics to the community and the fairness and the open-handedness. And that's what I think the point that Terry's making.
Yeah.
is
Oh, and I
that-
understand that.
Yeah, so we need to be, the perception has to be we're treating everybody fairly and the same.
I think that's true, John, but also, they're not all the same projects, right? That each project's different, right? So I think we have to look at the individual merits.
I think what Terry's point is just an overall perception of the community.
Yeah, no, I understand
A
that, I
couple
understand.
projects been denied, we have to be careful about
Yeah,
how we consider each project.
Certainly,
Not that this is not a great project, and I certainly would like to see the preservation of the building, but there is that perception out there.
Right, so you know, I would say, like, we'll go to town council, we'll do some more research. You know, we will continue to deliberate. You know, I think we're scheduled to vote March 14th. That's our tentative sort of line in the sand for when we'll, you know, sort of take roll. And we'll keep we'll keep the discussion going. I mean, it made me think, I was thinking about this the other day, and I was like, you know, it is kind of interesting that like, maybe like the Council of Churches hasn't put a lawyer on this to say like, how could this
Somewhere,
happen?
yeah.
You know, because
Yeah.
you think it's like it is much broader, and you know, I think certainly, you know, a citizens group like yourselves and working in one locality, it's a lot of, it's a tough burden, definitely.
It's a big nut, that's for sure.
Right, and it, like the preservation and even the legal work, right? Like, who would, you know, what kind of Massachusetts constitutional scholar would sort of take this on? And, you know, it got me thinking intellectually, like, that's it's more of a statewide problem, you know, and it probably needs like a statewide solution. And I know, and it's not a satisfying or easy situation.
Well, it sounds like from what I've read, that the reason that the churches aren't coming in, you know, because they're not getting funded, but they also, it's costly. I mean, the Acton Church decided to not reapply because they already had like $100,000 worth of legal expenses.
Right.
So it's, just, and so it would be interesting to know if any churches have been funded since that Acton case. I think that I read that there had been.
There were a couple who did bring lawsuits that they won.
The churches?
Churches.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm trying to think whether one was in Lexington. I remember doing a Google search at one point to see about what had happened. And I did come up with several that said, I think I sent that to you at one point along the way, who had, we'd rather spend the money on the building
Right.
instead of an attorney.
Yeah. Well,
And for you too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we as a town have
You
11
went
million
through it.
reasons to know that the legal stuff can get expensive, you know.
Very quickly,
So-
very quickly.
Well, thank you very much. We certainly appreciate all your time and effort, and like we said, we'll continue the conversation. We will, consult with town council. We'll consult with Community Preservation Coalition, and sort of, try to come back with a fulsome answer. I think, like as we conclude sort of our recommendations through this cycle. So thank you.
Great, well, thank you all.
Appreciate the
Thank you very much.
consideration.
Okay. Sorry, let me go back. So now the other groups are all open space. Let me hear from Lake Chickawik Lake Access Restoration Project. Will be next.
Ted Kelly, 214 Sutton Hill Road.
I remember you.
So we're back, again, asking for now funding for the actual construction portion of the project. We've gone through all the engineering. We've got, we think, a really good plan. Engineers have been great. They've given us their, cost estimation of what they think it will be. We're in the process of permitting. Obviously, it's the lake. There's 8 different permits that have to be obtained, and that will happen through the most of this calendar year. But we can start, bidding in December, and start building as soon as a contractor is selected and the town can get a contract in place. So potentially March or in the spring, as soon as that can happen. It's basically where we are.
Great. So you're looking at the timeline in the application, which is posted online for those at home. So it says like the permitting could start, and then bidding and construction into 2025. Okay. Questions? I think Adam's the only one who wasn't on the committee. So I'll set a little context just for like a moment. So Mr. Kelly came to us 3 or 4 years ago with the proposal to fix the boat ramp, and has come back and probably took what was a small hobby and turned it into a large obsession. And we've been realizing like the difficulty of permitting something on the lake, adjacent to a state road and so forth. And it was kind of a simple idea that out on Route 133, sort of behind Butcher Boy, that landing should be, a recreation site. And so it's been, we funded 2 tranches of plans already, and definitely been up in front of many different boards and commissions, and worked closely with. And who have you been working with from the town? Just, I can't remember all the names, but I know it's many.
Gene Enright in planning has been a real help to us. John Borghese and the DPW. We've gone through a couple people in conservation, but Amy's now there and helping us on that. We have the fire chief, Johnny Weir, who's been reviewing it from his needs, and then Peter Boynton has been kind of driving a lot of the initial ramp design for the project, and just making sure it conforms to all the lake regulations, which it will. This doesn't change any of the lake use regulations at all, just supports them. I would just add one thing, which was, originally the request was just fix the launch area, but the whole site is in need of repair, and probably 80% of the work is to make the site improvements. So the retaining wall, which is completely falling apart, and quite frankly is almost a danger now, encompasses a lot of the scope and a lot of the budget. And the boat launch area is actually a pretty small piece of it, but if you're in there doing that work, you should do it all at once. And so all the engineering's been done. They've done all the stormwater analysis. So I think, it's a good set of plans, and we just really need to build it, so.
Yeah, it's a great project that will be certainly an asset to the community once it's developed.
Yeah.
How confident are you in the construction estimate?
Well, I talked to EV Partners about this at length, and I said, could we consider this like the not-to-exceed number, and we should be able to come in under it? And the answer was yes. And in fact, I pushed on them a little bit and brought the contingency down. Because when you look at the materials here, it's concrete, it's sand, it's pavers, it's block. There's not a huge variation in the cost for these things. And so, we felt pretty confident, we can get it underneath these numbers. And with the contingency in there, it's a 25% contingency.
Yeah.
Should cover anything that we
yeah.
can anticipate now. So I believe we'll be under it, but nothing's going down, as you know.
I know that. That's why I asked you that, because we certainly don't want to see you come up short on it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this changed about 126,000 from last year when they were just basing it on their concept plans, and they came up with that number. Now they went through their design development and got to permitting, and they adjusted the numbers up a little bit, but not a lot. In fact, they gave us numbers in May and just retuned them, and it's within $5,000. So
Yeah. Things have stabilized a little.
yeah.
Other questions?
Ted, do you just have, can you just give me an idea of how many folks you expect to sort of use this?
Oh, gosh, all right. Last year, people asked us that. The DPW issues lake permitting, boat permits. And I think I might have the numbers, but I think it was there was like 250. They cap the number at a certain amount. And then they do allow other day users to come in and use it. But it's a cap number. The DPW has it. They can certainly get it for you. But they do have rack space down there for, I believe, 35 boats. They've got storage racks for that people bring in and then are supposed to remove at the end of the year. But as Peter pointed out, the actual lake use is it's year-round. I mean, people can go use that lake and boat on it anytime
yeah.
there's water.
No. You did a good job the first time.
Right, right. Well, thank you, Mr. Kelly, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay. All right. Why don't we do CPC Memorial Park, and then do the library last, because Mr. Rudis has to step out, so I think that'll be the easiest flow.
Hi, I'm Leslie Frazier. I'm 24 Cobblestone Circle. I'm part of a group called Friends of Memorial Park. We're a subcommittee of the North Andover Improvement Society. They hold the 501c3 designation. The storms of this past fall and then again in January did a lot of damage to Memorial Park. Memorial Park is the one right on Main Street, adjacent to the library. So it's a very visible, prominent place. It's also the only real open space in town that's accessible to strollers, to wheelchairs, to walkers, and it's also over 100 years old. So we're looking at it from a historic perspective as well as a park and open space perspective. We needed, as Friends of the Park, we really needed a comprehensive evaluation of the damage that was done, and we also needed a plan as to what to do. So we had two arborists come, one from Mayor Tree, who's been doing all the work in town. You've seen the trucks everywhere. And Save a Tree is the other one, and those are the two estimates within the proposal. Very different approaches. Mayor is a company that takes down trees, and Save a Tree tries to do exactly what its name implies. We have 12 trees there that cannot be saved because of damage, because of bug infestations, because of disease, and they're dangerous. They are hazards. We've had big chunks of them come down. There are pictures in the proposal that shows you some of these things that have come down on the paths. So that's our first priority, is to make sure that people will be safe. The park is highly used all year. We're there in the snow doing the trails, the pathways. We work with the DPW, and we are volunteers from the Friends, who are really 4 of us. And Philo was the founder of that, and also the one to get the park on the designation for the National Historic Register. She worked for years on that. So we're in that designation. We also have volunteers from the Improvement Society, from the Garden Club, from the Boy Scouts, and the neighbors. And we have been able to do a lot of maintenance to help out the DPW, and of course they help us. When situations arrive, I give them a call, or someone gives them a call, and they do what they can. They have been so stretched with these storms that they haven't been able to address a lot of these things. The volunteers we have also given funds and a lot of sweat equity. But we can only do the shrubs, the things that we can reach. This is talking about the trees and the canopy. As an example, behind the World War I monument were 2 magnificent American Liberty elms. One came down last year due to Dutch elm disease, and the other one is now showing signs of the same thing. They were a match set behind the monument. They were perfect. And actually, the Garden Club took them as seedlings 25 years ago, and they became that big in 25 years. So now that one's down, the other one has got to go. But that's true all around the park. I've talked to John Lavin a lot. We're in agreement on the trees that need to come down. Both arborists were in agreement as to the ones that, that should come down. And then after that, there needs to be significant pruning to take away any hazards that are left, to actually strengthen the canopy by making it healthier. After the pruning is done on the remaining trees, we also would fertilize them to strengthen them and then treat the diseases. There are a lot of opportunistic diseases and bugs that come in when things are in tough shape. So we need to treat those, and that's a long, over a long haul to get their strength back up. They're living things. They don't, it's not put paint on it and it's solved. These are things that need to be followed for several years, and as they start to get better, we would tail off. We have never fertilized those trees before, and now that they're in trouble, even climate change has made a huge difference on the sugar maples. They need that cold in the winter to keep them healthy, and we haven't had that. We had a drought 2 summers ago, and this last summer it poured all summer. So things are suffering, and we're trying to save it. The park is basically intact from the original design of 1922, which was an Olmsted Brothers design. It's part of Tavern Acres, which is that whole surrounding area, and that whole area with the park as the heart of it is the one that's on the National Register. About 25 years ago, we did a full restoration with Peter Hornbeck in town. Just as an aside, Peter was a student of Henry Vincent Hubbard. He was the original designer of the park, and Hubbard was a student of Olmsted himself. So we have kind of a direct lineage down the line with this kind of history and the design principles. And we try to stick to the design principles because we want to keep that same vision intact. Plants are not available that were in the original designs, and we try to do things that are more native plants now than they did back then. So we try to keep the feeling of the park going. We have funds already spoken for. The town is going to plant 5 trees when this is all over. And we have funds from the Improvement Society, the Garden Club, to make almost half of what we need. Not quite, but almost half. So we're hoping that you'll look on us favorably and give us that last $19,000 that we can do to make this work. We want to have this keep going for another 100 years. I don't know if you have any questions. Happy to answer.
No, I mean, I think the number is important. So it's around $33,000 over the next few years. I think it's a little bit an initial outlay of about 21, and then about $2,000 a year. So I wanted to get that into the record.
Which they're asking for $19,000 from CPC.
Right. So $19,000. Want to get that in the record, and I think it's definitely a great project. Any questions?
A couple questions. First question is, I understand it. I assume the money is to take the trees out and provide the ongoing maintenance and support.
We already have the funds to take the trees down and to grind the stumps. The rest is the pruning, which is major, nothing we can do. It's very specialized. You need professionals who are climbing up there, and you need the equipment to do that. That's the most expensive thing, is to do the pruning. And then these treatments to keep them healthy is a little more ongoing. At this point, I don't think it'll have to be done every year, but I've put in as though we might have to do that. other things.
I mean, the concern I have is whether this qualifies as a CPC expenditure, because it's a little bit easier when you're dealing with a building, and that is generally what
Exactly.
CPC is set up for, but the idea is in a building, if you're doing like a gut level rehab of a building, that counts, but if you're doing maintenance and items like that, you can't fund CPA with that. When you get outside, it's a little bit different, it's a little bit harder, but I kind of think we're on the line here. I'm not sure.
But
As
with-
much as I would want it to be fundable, I'm not sure it is, unfortunately.
Within the written goals, our parks, and our park is passive recreation, that's also within your goals.
No, it is. I'm not suggesting it is, but we're only within those categories allowed to fund certain types of projects, and we can't fund maintenance activities. And, you know, I mean, we could ask the coalition
Right.
to see if they've had some that have come up that are similar to this, but that under the state law, it may be that it falls on the side of it that we can't fund it. I mean, I'm not saying that because I'm opposed to it, I'm saying it 'cause
Okay.
that's what the law says.
John, I just have a question. I don't think you have an answer on that. If this project were to be carved out with blocks of things, I don't disagree relative to the maintenance part is, because a lot of this does sound like maintenance
Right.
that you need.
Yeah.
And I'm not opposed to that either, but could you carve out things that you could say, you know, like you already said, you already have money being spent for taking trees down.
Right.
You got some big numbers in there relative to tree removal.
Exactly, yeah.
Is there a way that they could carve that out, call it CPC, and all the other things that you want to do
Well,
being done by other
that's
people?
sort of where I'm going, but we need
Right.
some guidance
Right.
of which things you pick and choose.
Do you see where I'm
about what
going?
we're allowed to fund.
Pardon?
You would say, understand what I'm saying? In other
Yes,
words,
I do. I do.
distinguish between annual fertilization
Right.
versus removal of a tree, stump
Right.
grinding.
Replanting,
And
yeah.
replanting. Those things I can see being CPC.
And those are a one-shot deal, and
Right.
that's probably what you're thinking.
Right.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Like one shot right now.
right now.
We don't know what storm is
Who
coming
knows
this
what climate
spring.
change is going to do,
Right.
that's right.
Right, and, but I do feel that this is a preservation and a rehabilitation project because the maintenance we have been able to take care of. This is unique. This is a timely thing right now because of what's happened in the fall and in January. We had another 2 trees go down in January. We had one struck by lightning. So those are unique things, and that's where I'm coming from.
So, you know, I'm on the same page as John. I think it's definitely something I'd love to see too, you know, if we could do it right, you know, so if we can get some guidance on that, I think it would be, you know, make sure we're doing it the correct way. I'd be in favor of it. You know, it's a great project, and a great park and well-used.
Well used, yep.
So, and we greatly appreciate all the effort that goes into, you know, the maintenance that you guys do all the time, you know. I live right near there, I drive by it, I see it all the time, so.
You see us out with our mulch?
I wonder, is there kind of a term or I don't know, sentence that, particularly those of you that have been on the committee for a number of years, that you have used as kind of a guide in these circumstances? Because I've sort of thought that it's got to be a capital project, right? It can't be a maintenance project.
That's kind of what we were just discussing.
That's
Right.
and that's what I mean.
Really
Yeah.
the definition of maintenance versus preservation,
Right. Right. Right.
so we could make a
Right,
judgment.
But if they had a specific layout or design that was done and they're trying to bring that back so that it goes back
yeah.
to its original,
Yeah.
that would be something, I think, that we
Yeah.
would definitely be able to do, and I think you're trying to do that.
Yes.
You know, so, to the best of your ability, what plants that are available, and I think we just need guidance on how to go with it, and part of it, we're not gonna be able to do, so you just need to use that other money on the parts we couldn't do,
Okay.
and we could find out the parts we can do. You
Right.
know, I think that's the road we have to take.
Just moving money around.
Right.
All in different pockets.
Right. So it sounds like, just to speak generally here, pruning might be a lot more of a challenge versus
Taking that tree down.
It's putting in it, taking a tree down,
Right. Taking a tree down and replacing it with one.
or putting in a new
Yeah.
one, right. And just to be clear, none of the work here can be done by our local DPW, correct? It's just beyond their
at-
scope, or?
At this point, a lot of these were on the docket to be taken down before because they were already in trouble, especially the street trees. And the DPW is all set to do that. All this happened in September and October, and they have been out straight totally,
So you're saying they don't have the bandwidth to do some of this work?
Pardon?
You're saying they don't have the bandwidth to do some of this work?
Yes, exactly, that's a
I
good word.
I think it's a combination. I talked to John yesterday about it, and he said that some of it, like you said, involves climbing, it involves different things. They can't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't have that
These
kind
are
of.
significant tree,
And,
yeah.
They're limited in the size of the.
Right.
And
the
and
services,
if they
yeah.
drop a tree with all those other smaller trees around it, the damage they would do, where these other guys have cranes that they can
Right,
come in.
when they can put it down easily, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And they're being, Mayor has been extremely reasonable in their prices. If you look at those, Sabre Tree was much more expensive, and so we would be going with the mayor. But it's specialized work.
Yeah, I had one other question. You had mentioned that some of the trees are a hazard.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, how much of a hazard, is it, are these sort of like imminent, is it imminent danger for those walking through, or?
I would say we've been very lucky so far. If you look at some of those pictures, sizable branches, 6 inches across, have fallen on the paths. Now, they fall at night, they fall early in the morning, but we don't know when that's going to happen. So it has been hazardous, and that's part of my reason to really pursue this now, is to make sure that we're taking out as much as we can of the hazards, and also in the pruning, you're making the tree healthier so that those things don't happen, as well as the fertilizing. It feeds them so that they're stronger, and you're not going to have so many dying in branches and branches that go down in a windstorm. So we have very few that are 100 years old. There are a couple. And so we're trying to save those too, but,
So we will definitely study this and
Great.
get back to you, and, maybe we can make revisions and adjust before we vote in March. I think that's the prudent way to go.
I really appreciate that. Thank you all for your
Thank you.
time.
Thank you.
Okay. And now the library group.
Okay, Bill, we're going to drop off for now.
Great, thanks. Let's let the record reflect Mr. Rudis has recused himself.
Don't forget to call him back at some point.
Yeah. That's what the vice chair's for.
I'll call him back.
Good evening, I'm Kathleen Keenan, I'm the director of the Stevens Memorial Library. I do have 2 other trustees behind me, but they're not necessarily planning to speak. They're here for some other issues as well. Along with Ron, I'm very fortunate in that I have trustees who do lots of important work in town, so sometimes they just send me by myself. Anyway, so first I want to say thank you always for the work that you've provided us, the funds to do. And for this next stage, the construction project, you've actually already funded the initial work, which is the design to study what could be done. And obviously, we've designed for the maximum capabilities there. In the funds that you've already granted us, which I'm calling Phase 1, we have the money for the engineering and for the actual process of going up to bid and for construction management. So if this project goes forward, all those other relative costs are attached and already covered. This is really looking just at the actual construction and development work itself. The library, some people call it the triangle lawn, some call it the north lawn, some call it the historic entrance lawn. It's basically a grassy area that goes dead every summer. It does not have much shade. It's not particularly usable for anybody accept someone who's pretty stable on their feet. There's a slope to it. You know, you get gophers and voles and things like that. So it's not particularly attractive once the summer really dries us out. Last summer, it looked great because we were pretty much flooded all the time. We'd really like to turn it into a space that a lot of people can use for different kinds of things, really associated with the library, but again, open, you know, all hours so people could be there. We've met with the neighbors to show them the idea. The neighbors who came to the neighborhood meeting were very pleased to see that we were going to do something with the area. They were not very concerned that there would be a lot of activity at night afterwards. We already watch the property so that there's not a lot of activity there at night. The police department is very supportive, coming around on rounds and stuff. So we think it can be developed and will still be maintaining the atmosphere of the neighborhood, but be a more usable space than it is right now. One of the things that I particularly looked at, and Dan Blecker, who was here before Zach, was very helpful at giving me pointers on different kinds of things. What kinds of things you can do in the design that makes it easier for somebody who has maybe not perfect mobility to use some parts or all parts of what we would do with the lawn. So that's the reason for the visit tonight and the request for funds.
Thank you. I'm going to start with questions. Okay.
Certainly an elaborate design. I guess one of my concerns is obviously the price tag on this project. Another concern is just site distance, where this is going to be landscaped up at Main Street. Traffic pulling out could be a concern. I think that was brought up before.
It was. John Borghese, who's the town engineer, came and met with me a few weeks ago. And I appreciate that we had the preliminary meeting so you could ask questions. So I tried in this latest update to make sure I covered them. So there is a letter there from John. He looked at the design. He thought it was a really nice design. It certainly is an ambitious one. And one of his statements, and one of the things that I do routinely as library director, is if there's another town department with expertise, I have them on speed dial for these kinds of projects. So John has already made the commitment that when we were at the stage, let's say, of planting, for instance, he would be involved to help us judge things like the sight line.
I think I asked this question the last time, just in terms of phasing or scaling back. And is there an opportunity to use Patriot Park for some of these programs, rather than a full-blown development of that area? This is to try to make it more feasible in terms of dollar value.
Sure.
Because obviously it's a very expensive
It is
improvement.
expensive, and that was one of the things that I actually talked to John Borghese about as well, because he has a better sense of what's happening with the construction industry, costs of materials, and labor is always the biggest part of a process like this. And that was one of my questions, is did we think, I went back to the landscape architect, Tim Wong from Waterfield Design, and said, could we put this into phases? And you could do 2 parts, but you wouldn't really do you wouldn't delay doing the second part. The majority of the money is to go in and do the groundwork. So we'd be addressing drainage, we'd be addressing contouring the ground and stuff like that. If you go ahead and contour the ground, you're going to put in the patio then, because you have a bad summer like last year, that contouring will be gone if you wait a year to put in the paving, stones, for instance. So things like, could we put off putting in the benches, putting in things like shrubbery, maybe, but that doesn't change the cost too much. In terms of Patriots Memorial Park, the library does use it for some activities. However, we do have, in the past, had comments from the neighbors who've come in when we've had a children's program in the summertime in the park and reminded us that it's a quiet, passive place and asked how we were allowed to do it. When we use the park, we first go to the town management here and apply to use it pretty much the same way now that somebody would apply to use the town common. So it's a space we can use for some things, but it's very limited. Again, part of it is the park has its own intention and not to be a playground and not to be a community stage, so.
When I grew up, that's the way it was, but not lately. I see volleyball nets out there, I see all kinds of things going on that if we brought a football over there, the police cruiser would be down in about 5 minutes, to get us out of there, but not anymore.
Wow, I'm surprised the neighbors haven't been out to visit them, because 2 summers ago, we had children out, and they were learning to throw I mean, we're talking like 5- and 6-year-olds learning to throw Frisbees. And one of the neighbors was quite indignant, and we're like, it's a program, it lasts basically an hour and a half.
Sure.
And we're quite conscious of the park, so we don't bring in things to install. We're not bringing in nets and driving things in the ground or tying things to trees.
And
It's
this
just been an
particular-
interesting experience.
And this wouldn't accommodate those things either, right?
The-
You wouldn't have Frisbees being thrown on.
There's actually, because the lawn has sort of 3 levels or 3 plateaus, the lowest level down, it is still mainly a flat level lawn, where we could in fact do something like have the Frisbee catching dog come in and demonstrate how we can catch Frisbees. And then the 5-year-old wants to throw the Frisbee for the dog to catch it. They're not huge circus acts, they're a little bit more contained than that, so. But that's part of what we looked at, is what kinds of things have we done in the past, or, could we do them? We've been very fortunate because of our good partnership with the school district. We've gone and used school space sometimes too. That gets a little bit more complicated as well, so. Other kinds of questions?
I will share Rick's concern and be sort of less polite than he was about the money. I think it's a bridge too far. I find selling a $900,000 project to the town for less than half an acre of land is a huge stretch. I really think it's too much. I just can't in good conscience say we should fund this with all the other things going on. That's just so much more money than I could even conceive that this would cost. And I'm sorry for being, but I'm trying to, because I'm not the only person who'll think this way. And people will get up at town meeting and say, this is way too much money.
Yeah, I would agree with John, and I would ask that maybe look at ways to scale it back. I understand the walkways or whatever might be a hazard and that type of thing, but it just seems like to go with something this large, and, I don't know how important the fencing is. The fencing bothers me for this. I come up Elm Street every day, and that new fence at the top of Elm Street where you can't see, even though it looks like you should be able to, when you get even with it, you can't see, and I'm afraid something like that might happen again, coming down Green Street. So maybe the fence could be if it's not needed. But look at ways to scale the project back, I think might be, for me, would be the way to go. Because I agree with John, I think it's stick a shot.
There's certainly ways to reduce the costs. Instead of granite, there's concrete. It may not be as elaborate looking, but I think John and Terry have a point that for the community to accept this, they're going to look at this as a very expensive project that they're probably not going to want to support. Even though it's beautiful on paper, but in a practical sense of things, it's just tough to support with that price tag on it.
I think, this is a very prominent location, right, that we all drive by every day. And I think this is gorgeous and it would be beautiful. I am not a construction expert. I'm just a regular guy here in town that volunteers his time on this committee. Construction costs have obviously just ballooned insanely over the last few years post-COVID. But I look at this thinking like the average town person that's going to be at town meeting, and I say to myself, 3 years ago, I purchased my 3,500 square foot home on half an acre of land for less than the cost of this project. So I think that's hard to swallow. There are very few organizations, I think, that are more important to a community, by the way, than its library. And I think this is it's a wonderful looking project, but it's just, I don't know, can you say in a nutshell, why this is so expensive?
it's groundwork. If you're going to bring in heavy construction equipment and level the ground, if you're going to change underground drainage, if you're installing an irrigation system. So if you
It's
keep,
all of them.
you know, if you've done anything like put in a patio at home, if you've put in an irrigation system, part of it is you're doing it on private property. We're doing it on municipal property, so we have to use prevailing wages, working under union constraints and things like that, which change our operating costs from what you might be able to do at home, for instance. That's some of the things that, you know, I'm learning about myself because I'm not the construction expert either. We did have a professional construction cost estimator do the cost that's included here. And it does include contingency funds, because, you know, sometimes once you start digging things up or taking walls down, you might find something you didn't know was there and it needs to be repaired. So it would be lovely to think we wouldn't need to use the contingency funds, but my experience with all the projects at the library is you need contingency funds because something could be different than what you expect. And we originally had hoped to do all of the work on the historic entrance in the same project, which was to deal with the granite steps and to, because we would already actually have the heavy equipment there, removing the granite steps and rebuilding them, and literally keep using the equipment to do the groundwork. But with COVID and other delays and things like this, we've now ended up splitting it into two separate projects. And that was one of the things that Leslie Fraser mentioned, is that when you have to bring the equipment, the scaffolding back in the second time, it's tough to swallow that secondary cost. But that's also how sometimes projects have to be split. And this is an instance where we did split the work into two pieces. And we made those decisions before COVID, so that's part of what's really changed the results for us.
Just to return back to one of Terry's comments about cost and opportunities, could you have your cost estimator kind of reevaluate the finishes on the project? Meaning something alternative to granite, an alternative perhaps to the pavers on those walkways. I mean, those are two things that come to mind, but you know, when a cost estimator looks at a project, you know, the cost of finishes is kind of a unit cost, and if you can get something for a third of the cost instead of full cost that you've provided, it might be a good idea. It might be helpful for us to look at that alternative, that, you know, instead of buying a Rolls Royce, we've got a Chevy, but we've got a workable, hopefully beautiful system that, or area that would suit your needs. So I just putting that out as a request.
Is there any opportunity to raise any private funds or other funds for this project?
We would certainly look towards that. One of the things about a public project like this, until you have all of the money in hand, you cannot go out to bid. And so what that does for projects like this, of course, is it puts a time clock on it. And so the longer you don't start the work, the more expensive it becomes. That's always been one of the catches for some of our projects. And that certainly, we experienced that with re-engineering and rebuilding the granite steps, the entrance there to the building itself. That, you know, a 3-year delay really significantly impacted the price to it. So, on the other hand, I'm not a person to say we can't do anything, and if it requires us looking for other opportunities, and sometimes things just don't happen as fast. So my intention is certainly to do something with that area, you know, whether it's this year, whether it's this particular way to do it. We certainly will still continue to look for ways to do something with that space.
Yeah, I have a question about sort of grand, big picture in terms of the library and its capital needs over the years. I mean, certainly, as you alluded to, we've done a lot of funding. It definitely is a historic building. It's also a town building, you know, so to what extent is are capital needs of the library provided for in the relevant town capital planning, you know, in the 5-year capital plans and so forth?
The library fortunately is in really quite good state structurally. So I came in 2008. Since 2008, we've replaced many of the windows. We have replaced the rooftop units, the air conditioning units. All of this has been funded by the town. They have funded restoring the flat portion of the roofs. So if you look at the library, you'll see there's a clay tile dome, and there's a small clay tiles roof on the chimneys, but the majority of that is a flat surface. The town funded that for us. We have worked with facilities. Steve Foster's great. He's found grants for us. So using an LED grant, we have replaced all of the lighting fixtures inside the library, which is, there's nothing more important than good lights when you're trying to read a book or find a book in a dark shelf. So we work regularly with Steve Foster. I specifically, personally work, I was talking to Steve last night about it, and how are we doing with things. The town's most recent, very generous capital improvement money is that we are gutting the public bathrooms, which have not been really touched except by, you know, new water faucets or new toilet seats since 1996. Before COVID, we had more than 1,000 people a week in the building, and public toilets take a beating, and with that kind of traffic, so they're long overdue. The town, this year, we had our budget presentation last night. The town is funding all of the heat, all of the electricity. They're certainly funding the staff. They're funding the materials that will be there. The town, using ARPA funds, has done something which is a tremendous thing in our mind. We love the library building, but you can't put an addition there. There's no place to go on the property. And the town has grown, and we're fortunate a lot of people use the library. So we needed more space, and the option wasn't there for more space in the building. So using ARPA funds, the town has given me $480,000 to buy a bookmobile, which is a van which is being customized to be a bookmobile. We'll be able to use it to visit the schools, to visit the senior center, to visit a place like Prescott House. We're laughing and saying we're going to be showing up at the football games too, because even people going to football games will actually read books. I know, because we have football in my family, and we still read books too. So the town's been extremely supportive. We get the general operating costs every year, and we've had, since I've been here in 2008, we've had really significant additional funds. The town's very creative with their funding, so some years it's capital improvement money, some years it's, you know, like an ARPA grant that we've done that. We also receive some money from the Massachusetts state budget. The Massachusetts state budget supports all of the public libraries. There are 365 public libraries in Massachusetts. Your library card will work in the first 35 towns you can drive to. You can go to any of those other 330 libraries with your library card and register and use anything in all of those. We're very lucky Massachusetts supports as much as it does. I use that state aid money. So, for instance, our wall-to-wall carpeting was replaced in, astoundingly, October 2007, and I've only had to replace the carpet in one room since then. We've used the state aid money, and we've invested in a commercial carpet cleaner. We're fortunate to have a very skilled custodian. We have a regular maintenance routine, so all the wall-to-wall carpeting is cleaned 3 times a year, 4 times if we can get it in, taking out that salt that comes in off the walkways. We are pretty conscious of, you know, the money that we have and how do we make it go as far as we can. Certainly, and part of this goes to finishes. You know, granite will last longer than concrete. So sometimes you use concrete because you need a safe walkway right now, but if you're hoping it's going to last for 50 or 100 years, you might look at something else.
No, thank you. That's really helpful, I think, to get us a sense of the big picture and the way that I think, you know, all the different groups in town come together around the library, so, and in the state. So thank you.
My 2 cents, Kathleen, since I've known you, mostly on the finance side, you've done great. You've really done great.
Thank you. That's one of the times where you can walk out and say it's a labor of love. It's one of those things, most librarians really like sharing things, but when you see the results that, you know, people are benefiting from it. I will give you an example today, which is extraordinary. And by the way, your name, as the Community Preservation Committee, is now being linked to the town's, the library website. This month, we're doing the community read, where we work with the school district to encourage the children to, of course, read and talk and have something in common. So the topic this month is The Other Road, How to Make it Greener in North Andover. And so we're linking to the community preservation site to say, you're helping us with open space. We're linking to the conservation, they're protecting wetlands, things like this. So we have projects going on with the elementary schools, where we have about 4,000 students, 2,000, I think, in elementaries alone. And we have a bingo sheet for the kids to do activities like, you know, read a book about somebody who's a fire warden and protecting a forest, or water conservation. And like many instances, the document, the children's bingo sheet, is in English. And this afternoon, one of the teachers wrote, and she goes, I really need it in Arabic, Spanish, and Arabic, Spanish, and Portuguese. And I wrote over to my contacts at the school district central office, and half an hour later, I had the children's bingo sheet, Arabic, Spanish, Haitian Creole, Portuguese, and what was the fifth one? And English is the sixth.
They just purchased a machine that
Yeah, that
does
was
all
on
that.
WPZ this morning.
Oh, was it on the news this morning?
Yeah.
I'm going over to visit, because that's next on my ticket of what I'd really like to buy.
You can do many other languages.
Oh, it's extraordinary, but this is the part where, you know, when I say labor of love, I see the benefits of the work all the time, and I appreciate everything that any part of the town is able to do. Where, you know, part of it's the building, but the building is only the outside. It's what we do with the staff and the materials, and the connections we make with the other parts of the community. We have a project coming up, a program coming up at the end of April, where we'll be going and doing the project in the senior center, because it's a better space. At the end of this month, we have one of our movies being shown at the Warden Theater at this Historic Society. It's really been a lot of work, but it's really paid off to have these connections and find ways to use all the resources in the town and not feel that it's only the one way or the one place to do things.
Thank you. Any other questions?
And I hope you come to some of these events.
Yes.
And well, I don't think there's any question that this is a prominent, underutilized patch of land, so.
We'll find something for it. If
and-
not this, we'll find something else.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So, next up, what I thought we would do at the rest of the meeting is, we do have to, we have our next meeting scheduled in March, but we have only heard about half the projects. So we definitely need another meeting like this one where we hear from the project applicants and review the applications. So I think we need to get those scheduled. Right now, are you texting?
Yeah.
Okay. We need to get those meetings scheduled. I would say we should be, flexible on location. We probably won't be able to get this room every week, but we just have to, work with Zach and the town to find available spaces that work. But I know there are plenty of them. So I would propose we have, maybe I would rather meet, we don't want to meet, I don't think we want to meet on school vacation week. Next week is the week before school vacation week, right?
I like how you're looking at me.
I know.
I have the
Well, all these
kids.
guys are out of the woods,
Yeah, thank
Grandkids.
you. That's right.
I have little guys living with me.
that's true.
If I can get a break during school vacation week, maybe I'll want to be.
Do we want to do next week, the 15th?
That works for me.
Yeah.
That's
All
fine.
right, so why don't we?
Is that enough time to notify, to have a meeting?
Yeah, we've
You
been,
need 48 hours.
yeah, we've been in touch, yeah, that's plenty of time legally, and we've been in
Okay.
touch with everybody and said, we're gonna schedule these,
Okay.
as quickly as we can. And then I propose that we schedule another one before the 14th to sort of bring back, I mean, obviously we have like a to-do list right now, right? Like we've asked some questions, we've asked people to come back with things. And so I would say, you know, we schedule the first week of, what's the first week of March look like?
March 7th.
Yeah. We want to do March 7th and 14th, so we have the, you know, next week, we're hearing from all the other applicants. The 7th, we sort of nail down all our facts, and then the 14th is the meeting where we can really sort of dig in and vote.
So, yeah, okay. But as far as nailing down the facts, are we gonna try and talk to town council? Because I'm not sure we're gonna get an answer for this year on that.
Well,
And,
I think we, you know,
But
forward the
then-
application, and
but
we
the-
forward everything over. I mean, it was,
Yeah.
I would just say that I went on the CPC database, the state database, and you can filter, and I'll send this to the committee. But you can go on, and you can filter projects by type and by keyword and by year. So I clicked in 2020, 2021, 2023, the word church, and there were like 3 pages of projects that were funded at churches. And just in the, you know, and sort of looking at it, was like steeples, chimneys, restoration. So it's, you know, definitely everything I had looked at before in terms of like an overarching legal opinion. There doesn't seem to be any like new case or any new guideline or any new guidance, but it certainly seems like CPC funds are flowing in other places, and you know, and we should have town council sort of take a look at it, because I mean, even just in Boston, there were probably 20 projects on historic churches, you know, like you know, historic African American churches in Roxbury and different things. So I mean, you know, I think I totally agree with you on process and like setting up the right process, but like I think if we continue to sort of say like it's too complicated, we can't figure it out, you know, well, the rest of the city is doing that, is that really fair to the, you know, to the people in town? I do agree that like everyone should have this, you know, everyone should line up with the same set of hurdles in front of them,
Right.
you know, and so, you know, we should take a look, and you know, it'd be interesting to see if there are other cases in process, right? Like, I'm not sure.
if we could get a ruling and then somehow put that out on our website.
Yeah.
That this is how we view these projects, and then give everybody the opportunity to come back.
Yeah.
I would feel better.
Yeah.
You're saying like previous folks that presented in previous years?
Yeah.
Gotcha,
Well,
yeah,
yeah.
that makes
Yeah.
sense. And I'm curious, and forgive me if I'm asking, forgive my ignorance.
No.
Is town council usually at our disposal when we have these sorts of questions? Or is the onus kind of more on the petitioner? I'm sure it varies based on the question, but.
Well, I mean, so the town's always trying to consider how to protect its interests, right? So let's just say, for example, you know, we decided, hey, we're going to give funding to this church project, right? And then the town votes at town meeting to give the money and so forth, and someone sued us, right? Like, you know, I think the town could be, you know, in some way liable. So they're trying to protect their interest in this. So they're going to look out and say, like, the town's interest in this project, you know, the town's interest is to make sure that we don't end up in court over this.
So in
And-
that sense, the town council can help us and make sure we're making the right decisions.
Right.
Gotcha.
Okay.
I believe the town will set all of the approvals that we put forward for the town warrant, and they actually opine upon it, so.
Yeah. That's true. Okay. Why don't I do a quick update on the Schofield Mill project, because we brought it up last meeting. We asked the town manager back to us about it.
Before we move, are we saying the next meetings are the
February 15th, March 7th, and then the deadline for voting on March 14th.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So we wrote to the town manager, and the town manager replied. The project, so we've appropriated the context is we approved $200,000 for the FY '21 budget. And the building has been closed since 2019 due to safety concerns. Per the town manager, the project is currently on hold due to safety concerns. The facility is in worse conditions than anticipated. We need a new long-term solution to preserve the structure, and there are ongoing conversations with the North Andover Historical Society about whether they may be willing to assist. So,
Ron know anything about that?
Ron, do you have any updates on the Schofield Mill? Well, that's the society, not the. Well, that is the society, and not the not
Commission.
not the.
Not to be
commission.
confused.
Sorry,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry, I was on mute.
Yeah.
No, not beyond what you just described. I know that town is working or talking with the Historical Society, but nothing beyond that.
Mr. Limpert, would you like to?
Stan Lippert, 43 Stonecliff Road, member of the Board of Directors of the Historical Society. We have been having ongoing discussions with the town manager, not very frequently, but we really would like to take over the responsibility at some point for the Schofield Mill. And we have just hesitated to do that because we just had a lot of things in the works, you know, finishing up 800 Mass Ave and a bunch of things going on. So we've been a little hesitant to take on another responsibility, but we really want to take it on because that building is one of the most historic buildings in our community. I mean, it's a unique building and represents a unique point in sort of the Industrial Revolution in New England. Right. And so we just can't let it go away. The discussions that we've had with the town manager so far was about potentially transferring the money that you had set aside for that as a sort of a start. If we were to take over the responsibility for the building to start to do some renovation. As you may or may not have heard at some point in the past, the building was condemned by the building inspector because of some really serious insect infestation in the floor and beams.
So did they destroy those insects, or are they just still?
I believe they did. So
Okay.
I think they solved the insect problem.
Yeah.
But the damage, needs to be rectified.
Right.
And, there was a tentative plan to do that, but it took money and somebody sort of picking up the ball and
Yeah.
sort of doing something about it, and nobody was ready to do that. So the plan had been to wait through this fiscal year and then try to get to it next fiscal year. That was sort of our plan. And I don't know, if that's taking too long, then we can think about something else, but we really do want to make sure that that building is preserved. There's no question. That's like any of the buildings that we own, like the Parson Barnard House or any of those buildings, we really need to make sure that building is preserved. So.
Yeah. Like you say, that building is not only important to North Andover, but it's important to the whole Merrimack Valley.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, the Schofield brothers started a lot of the mills that are around in our area, all kinds of places like Rowley and Byfield and all over the place. They were everywhere. They built a lot of stuff. So, that turned out that was the first mill of its type. It was a fulling mill, and they didn't make fabric or anything there. But it was the first one of that type, as far as anybody knows in New England, or at least this part of New England. So, anyway, that's the plan.
It's amazing the story behind the machinery they brought in, how they did that.
Yeah.
It was, if you don't know, you should go down
Well,
and see it. So.
I just recently ran across a fairly lengthy discussion of the Schofield brothers and all of the things that they were involved in, you know, and I didn't realize how extensive their involvement in sort of the Industrial Revolution in this part of New England.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of stuff going on around here that I wasn't aware of, so I thought it was really interesting. So anyway, yes, we want to make sure that that gets preserved in some fashion. And you know, our thought about that, you know, completely differently from how it was being used before as a thrift shop, would be more like the way we use the Parson Barnard House. You know, it would be open some number of times a year, and we would have educational displays in the building to explain what it was and, you know, how it fit into the pieces of North Andover and all of that. But it would never have the same active use that it had when it was the thrift shop in there. So there would never be anything like that again. It would be like Parson Barnard House, right? It would be a historic building that would be open for people to tour, and there would be educational information in there to sort of let them know what it is.
It'd be nice if we could get some of the machinery back, but you probably never would see that. type of
Well,
machinery.
you know, you might be able to get some examples, right?
Right,
Yeah, you know, one or two things, so, anyway. All right?
Well, thank you.
We're good?
Appreciate it. Okay, and then before we do the minutes and kind of head for the exits, I did want to at least, you know, start to bring up and put a little context around, you know, the year we have ahead. So I really appreciate Zach's work. He took a look. I will share this up on the screen. It's in the folder as well in terms of in the financial report section. Let me share this. Let's see it here. Go up over there. I don't know if it displays all that well. But big picture, we have $17 million of a fund balance, $17 million in the CPC sort of account. We have, you know, we have encumbrances of about $10 million on that money. So those are funds that are set aside, you know, either for specific projects or that we have to target to specific purposes, because we do have to, you know, spend 10% of our money in each category. So when you net that out, you know, about 10 means we have around 8 plus revenue coming in interest income and so forth, which means we project somewhere around $9.5 million being available for this fiscal year. So I think, like, there's also, like, sort of a philosophical discussion about how much we should have on hand and how much we should keep, you know, because, you know, I want to go through this and take a look and say, like, okay, we're at about this, and also go back and say, like, what do we have in front of us this year, which is, you know, the projects we heard today, right? On the open space fund, we have Lake Achickawick for $980,000. We haven't heard about the Recplex, which, from my understanding, will be bonded, but that's an $11.6 million project.
Is that incremental?
That's incremental, yes.
So this is a $17 million project?
Right. You know, although we're talking about bonding, so I mean, it would be different.
But the problem, I guess, this gets at the core of what I'm most concerned about is, in the long term, the things that people are most concerned about with CPC is open space. And whether it's now, 5 years from now, or whatever, and it may not even happen, there's a couple of really large open space parcels that you'll never get another chance for. And if we spend all of our money on the list of projects now, we won't have enough money for those things that will make a difference for the next 100 years. So I think we need to be really careful.
Right. And so, I mean, the 11.6 is sort of, I mean, it's not like, it's coming for 11.6 at one time. It's talking about a bonding. So we'd have to figure out what the term of the bond would be and so forth. Then we have the library project. We have the town common stage, the park. It's $20,000, which a little bit more, a little bit less, a lot less, I would say. And then we look at historic preservation. Obviously, we have North Parish, a few projects from the town, and the Historic Society coming for next time, and then affordable housing. We have 800,000, 300,000 to the Housing Authority for sort of a bricks and mortar project, and then the Housing Trust, is coming as well. So I mean, I think we kind of look at it. There are a lot of projects coming up, and so like. I just wanted to set the table a little bit, like John was saying, like, where do we want to be and how do we want to approach this? Because I think that might be useful in terms of, like, what we have this year. I mean, I think the past couple of years, we haven't had to say, like, we're not going to do X because we can't afford it. Like, we've had large balances and we haven't had big projects the past few years. And so, now we're at a point where we do have to sort of say, like, we have limited resources and, more sort of projects being proposed. So I think, just wanted to hear a little bit of thoughts about that, and maybe, that might even be something that we, maybe we listen to everything and sort of come up with what we're comfortable funding this year. And, maybe we have to say to some applicants, like, yes, these projects are worthy, but this is not the year, and, maybe to a certain extent, we also have to look out and say, like, okay, how are the next few years going to look, especially for the sake of argument, if we did decide to bond something, that might mean that, we roughly get, what, $3 million a year in CPA funds from the surtax, right? So if we were saying that, if we were to understand that over the next 10 years, that's reduced by a third because we're bonding or something, right? Just for the sake of argument. Then it's certainly going to mean we have to trim our sails and operate differently. So I just want to make sure that we brought that up early and we're sort of thinking about it. And we could leverage certainly a lot of strengths with Tim and his financial calculator, right there. To think about that.
Look at that.
Wow.
Grid since 1985.
Yeah. So I think I just think that's a really important thing to kind of keep top of mind, and also, as John was saying, as we think strategically, and also about these things, we do have to be ready, and we have to, maybe we have to talk. The town has an open space plan that gets replenished. I mean, maybe we, maybe part of the inputs we take is to talk about, what, a 100-acre purchase looks like, right? Like, what does a 100-acre purchase look like if we were to do that again? I mean, what's the biggest purchase we've done, CPC, John, ever? I know Half Mile Hill was before
Well,
CPC.
there were, it's between $2 and $3 million, but remember, they were 20 years ago.
Right.
15, 20 years ago. So.
You know what might be helpful to your point, John, is to get a list of priority parcels.
Mm-hmm.
That, maybe ranked, and that might already be done by the master plan committee. But I think that would help, to help define what's remaining and sort of define, what our stretch goals are, so that as we try to, be a little bit more frugal, we've got something to point to, and something that would be, reviewed by the public and commented on too. This is what we think, and it may constrain us here and there from time to time, but at least we have something tangible to present to the citizens and the town government. And
What percentages do we need to spend of the CPA money for open land? Isn't it like 10%?
Well, it's 10%, yeah, in recreation.
In
So,
recreation?
Usually we have, I mean, over the years, I think the only ones we ever ran afoul were originally some of the housing ones. But what we did is we reserved
Right.
the
Yeah.
money and put it in a pot, and then when they had bigger projects, we used that money first before new money.
Yeah. I was just thinking, making sure we hit those bogeys.
Yeah, I don't think that's.
That's not gonna be a problem.
That'll be an issue, yeah.
Especially if we spend $18 million on a rec pop.
Yeah.
Okay. Ron, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I mean, I think that would be a good thing probably to start the next meeting with, is a discussion of, see if we can agree on how much we actually want to spend this year, or kind of frame the discussion on the rest of the projects.
Okay, so we'll add that to the agenda for next time. So I think we can run a similar format. We can, probably applicants come so they don't have to stay for the whole thing, and we could, maybe we have that discussion, next week, and then, then we're deliberating, within constraints that we've agreed before we move on. Okay.
Zach, one time you and I talked about cleaning up that website. Have you looked at that since we talked? I don't blame you.
I haven't,
I'm not asking you to clean it up, just about what should be, okay.
yeah.
All right, anything else? Okay, the next thing is the minutes from January 11th. We were all present. So do I have a motion relative to the Community Preservation Committee meeting minutes of January 11th?
Motion to approve the minutes as drafted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, any further motions?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.